República dos Estados Unidos do Brasil, cidade de Ananindeua.
Conheço,
Conhece essa cidade?
conheço.
É lá? É lá no norte?
Eu nasci lá.
Nasceu lá? E a senhora viveu momentos muito importantes da sua vida lá. Como é que era a sua vida lá, nessa cidade?
Olha, eu não lembro.
Não lembro de nada.
Não
tem-
lembro de nada, porque
nada.
faz muitos anos.
Faz muitos anos, né? E a senhora depois saiu dessa cidade e veio para uma outra cidade.
É,
E a senhora lembra como é que foi essa viagem?
não.
Não lembra?
Não, porque eu era muito, com licença da palavra, muito atrasada.
Muito atrasada?
Atrasada em certas coisas. Hoje não, hoje eu sou ativa, eu estou
À frente.
à frente com tudo.
E atrasada em que sentido? O que a senhora chama de atrasada?
Sei lá, pouco tempo que eu tinha chegado aqui,
Aham.
e eu não tinha, assim,
Não conhecia ninguém.
não conhecia ninguém.
E foi uma viagem longa?
Longa,
Muito longa.
muito longa.
A senhora lembra o que aconteceu nessa viagem? Encontrou alguém? A senhora dormiu?
Não encontrei ninguém,
Veio sozinha,
e sozinha.
com a cara e com a coragem.
Com a cara e a coragem.
E teve que ter muita coragem para vir?
Ah, muita coragem.
É.
Pô, porque sem
Sem dinheiro,
dinheiro.
sem conhecer ninguém,
É, exatamente.
sozinha, novinha no mundo. Por que a senhora veio para cá?
Para procurar trabalho.
Procurar trabalho. E mais o quê? Só trabalho ou tinha mais alguma coisa que a senhora estava procurando?
Não, eu estava querendo sair de lá, porque lá não arranjava emprego, não arranjava nada. Eu precisava mudar de vida.
Hi, I am Iury Salustiano Trojaborg, and I am a PhD student at the Malmö Theatre Academy and at the Agenda 2030 Graduate School on Sustainability at Lund University in Sweden. This is Ancestral Dramaturgies. 2 months after I started my doctoral studies, my maternal grandmother, Voinha, passed away in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, having reached the age of 100 years old. At the pivotal moment, I decided to look closer at her life and acknowledge how her migration journey from the Amazon rainforest region in northern Brazil to the southeast city of Nova Iguaçu in the suburbs of Brazil's then capital, Rio de Janeiro, in 1945, influenced the migration journey I many years later chose to follow. The reflection I propose here regarding questioning and listening to our ancestors is generally informed by a lifetime observing my maternal grandmother's attitude of questioning structures of power, and specifically illuminated by the stories she told me last time I encountered her alive in 2019 in Rio de Janeiro. Every time I had questioned my family members about the reason that prompted my maternal grandmother to leave Ananindeua and Belém, the answer received was a long and romanticized story that placed not the feminine, but instead the masculine in the center. Voinha migrated to Rio de Janeiro in 1945 to follow the so-called love of her life, Armando, my future grandfather, whom a couple of years earlier had been allocated a new position in the Army General Headquarters in Rio de Janeiro, back then the capital city of Brazil. Despite the enormous struggles undertaken by that feminine body to break free from the structural gendered violence within the society she inhabited, I could still perceive that the actions taken by my grandmother against patriarchal structures could only go so far. The feminine was still surviving according to a violent structure that did not allow a woman to exist individually without the masculine presence, away from the Catholic institution of marriage that hovers like an ever-present ghost over Latin American nations. The subsequent marriage with my grandfather in Rio de Janeiro did not prevent Voinha from continuing to suffer a type of violence that became normalized within such contexts, and therefore difficult to hold the perpetrators accountable for. After giving birth to 13 children, my grandmother was abandoned by my grandfather with no alimony. She then put into practice the sewing skills she had gained from her mother and became an industrial seamstress in order to financially sustain herself and her children. She executed this professional activity during her entire life, well into her 90s, and never married again. What I witnessed during this interview with Voinha was a woman who, despite suffering from dementia, still held agency and constructed a new persona who allowed the production of a never-before-heard narrative that allocated the masculine to a peripheral position. Living in a body intersected and understated by issues of class, gender, and sexuality, my grandmother developed an ability of reorganization and rearrangement in a way that she, before, when in a state of complete physical and mental health, had never voiced. When faced with questions concerning her migration path, she made use of her scarce memory and language available, turning speech itself into a bodily act in consonance with what Judith Butler states in Excitable Speech, A Politics of the Performative. Open quote. We do things with language, produce effects with language, and we do things to language. But language is also the thing that we do. Language is the name for our doing, both what we do and that which we effect, the act and its consequences. Close quote. Although Voinha was 97 years old, she still recalled being called a bossy lady by her own mother during her childhood in Ananindeua. During the interview, she regained and performed her bossiness by not hesitating to make bold statements regarding her decision to migrate. I went to Rio de Janeiro to look for a new job. I wanted to get out of that place because I couldn't find a job there. I couldn't find anything. I needed to change my life. While attentively listening to Voinha, I realized that she repeated certain phrases as an attempt to affirm the new positionality she was taking regarding her own stories. Sentences such as, I came by myself, or I didn't meet anyone, emerged as an empowered counterpart to the previously masculinized version of her migration journey. Listening to Voinha's recollections meant not only listening to her words, but also to the moments of silence, tones and fluctuations of voice, patterns of emphasis, facial expressions and gestures, resounding images, movements, and bodily stances. With the intention to mindfully listen to Voinha, I brought along memorabilia that would somehow guide her fragile memory back into her past experiences. Her original sewing machine played a vital role as she made it clear by stating that sewing indeed changed my life. This interaction between Voinha and her sewing machine became increasingly intense and meaningful during the interview. The old alliance of love and companionship between the two slowly unfolded, and she then recollected the long and lonely hours spent sewing in order to survive. The machine, an extension of her physical body, allowed her to become the breadwinner of a family composed of one woman, her then 13 children, and no masculine presence. The presence of the sewing machine allowed Voinha to foresee a possible future aligned with the independent life that she had always led. As K. Bambra Gurminda in Post-Colonial and Decolonial Dialogue states, open quote, by bearing witness to different pasts, one is not a passive observer, but is able to turn from interrogating the past to initiating new dialogues about that past, and thus bringing into new stories, and from those, new presents and new futures. Close quote. Conclusion. This presentation is an attempt to question the way stories are told, by whom and from which perspectives. Within my artistic practice, I'm interested in investigating how much the creation and consumption of certain stories can either perpetuate structures of power or potentialize the emergence of sustainable dramaturgies of care and resistance. While questioning my grandmother about her migration journey and the necessity to recreate herself in order to survive, I could identify similarities between the struggles I myself went through while emigrating from Brazil. A natural bond emerged, and this togetherness became an experience of questioning patriarchy. Together, two generations of a family shared experiences of empowerment and resistance. With the recent passing of Voinha, the possibility of using language to question and listen to her retelling and recreating her own story was suspended. Our communication, though, transcends the materiality of our bodies. Our conversation, therefore, continues. Thank you. Muito obrigada.